All right, we're going to move into solving quadratic equations. So in the first 3 lessons, you are going to learn 3 different types of solving. In each lesson, you have to use the way I am teaching you in that lesson. Okay, so when you learn this method, you have to use that method in this lesson. When you go to 6.2, you have to use that method in 6.2. And the same with 6.3. And then at some point, I'm going to start just saying solve the equation using an algebraic method. That's when you get to choose. But the point of each individual lesson in 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3 is to understand how to do that specific method. Okay? Also, this is where your graphing calculators are going to start coming in handy. Not to do the work for you, but to check your work. You have to do the method I'm telling you. I'm going to be checking that work. But then there's a way that your calculator can help you check your answers. Okay? So, first, quadratic equations can have 0, 1, or 2 solutions because a quadratic has an x squared. And that squared tells you that at most there could be 2 answers. Solutions to a quadratic equation are also called roots, zeros, or x-intercepts. So if I ask you to find any of those 4 things, solutions, roots, zeros, or x-intercepts, you're finding the same things. Like I said, there are multiple methods. We're going to talk about 3 different methods. And recall that a quadratic equation makes a parabola when I graph it, which looks like a U. Or it could be an upside down U. Okay, it could just be upside down, but it looks like a U, curved. A no solution would look something like this, where it never touches the x-axis. One solution is where it touches it exactly once, and 2 is where it touches it twice. So to solve first, we're going to solve by factoring. So before we do that, we need to talk about what is called the zero product property. The zero product property, if you know 2 numbers multiply together and the result is 0, what do you know? If I have 2 numbers and I multiply them together and the answer is 0, what must you know? Pause the video and think about it for a little bit. If 2 numbers multiply together and the answer is 0, then one of those numbers must be 0. Because the only way to multiply and get an answer of 0 is if you have 0 times something, or something times 0. So the zero product property says if I have 2 things being multiplied, a times b equals 0, then a equals 0 or b equals 0. Right? Because if a is 0, then 0 times something is 0. Or if b is 0, then something times 0 is 0. So we're going to use the zero product property to solve these first few equations. If I have 2 things being multiplied and I'm equal to 0, then either the first thing equals 0 or the second thing equals 0. So when I look at number 1 and you're going to say, oh, I should distribute. No, that's not what the zero product property is telling us to do. The zero product property says if you have 2 things being multiplied. So in this first example, what are the 2 things being multiplied? X and x plus 3. So either x equals 0 or x plus 3 equals 0. We are trying to solve the equations. So I'm solving this equation. I'm doing that by getting x equals 0. That one's solved. This one is not solved. If x plus 3 equals 0, then x equals negative 3. So I'm writing my answer in set notation. What that means is I'm going to say x equals My two answers are 0 and -3. I'm going to put them in these squiggly brackets. And I'm going to put the smaller number first, comma, the bigger number. So this equation has a solution of -3 or 0. Because -3 times, in parentheses, -3 plus 3, well, -3 plus 3 is 0. -3 times 0 is 0. Or if I plug in 0 for x, 0 times 0 plus 3 is 3. 0 times 3 is 0. Example 2. Zero product property says if you have two things being multiplied. What are my two things being multiplied? M and 2m minus 4. So either m equals 0 or 2m minus 4 equals 0. M equals 0 is solved, but 2m minus 4 is not. You should add your 4, get 2m equals 4, and then you should divide by 2 to get m equals 2. So m equals either 0 or 2 in set notation. These little squiggly brackets here, in your Chromebooks, you should be able to find those little squiggly bracket buttons. They're kind of next to the letter P on your keyboard. You have to hit Shift and then the button next to P. Those are squiggly brackets. I don't need them to look pretty. Try your best to not make them look exactly like the number 3, but as long as they are not parentheses, nor are they straight brackets, they are squiggly brackets. That's set notation. Number 3. What are the two things being multiplied in number 3? I have this, p plus 1, times this, p minus 9. So either p plus 1 equals 0 or p minus 9 equals 0. So in this equation, that would mean p equals -1. Right? Are we with me with that? P equals -1. And this one, that would mean p equals 9. Right? P minus 9 equals 0, so p must be 9. So my answers are -1 or 9. I want to show you a little trick once you know what your two things are, your two things being multiplied. I had an x and an x plus 3, okay? And when I had just an x, I got 0. When I had just an m, I got 0. When I had x plus 3, I got a -3. When I had 2m minus 4, well, it's going to be the opposite of this divided by this. So positive 4 divided by 2 is 2. When I had a p plus 1, it's the opposite of this divided by the number in front, which is 1. So that's just -1. The opposite of this is positive 9. So this one is going to be y equals. Now, I do want the smaller one first, so you might need to think about that for a moment. But if this one is positive, I'm going to make the opposite as negative. This is negative, I'm going to make the opposite as positive. So this one's going to be smaller. And it's going to be -3 divided by your coefficient of 4. And this is going to be a positive 5 divided by the coefficient of 2. There are your answers without any work. You can show your work, but I'm showing some of you who like to be able to do it quicker in your head. There's a way to do that. Uh-oh, my lights went off. One moment. Okay, let's move on to the back. How to actually solve by factoring. Oh boy, Unit 4, factoring. Let's recall how to factor. So first, your equation needs to be in standard form, which must be ax squared plus bx plus c set equal to 0. You have to have the x squared first, x in the middle, then your constant, and it must be set equal to 0. Because we are eventually going to use the zero product property, which means you have to be equal to 0. So if you're not in that form, you're going to rearrange however you need to. Combine like terms, move things all to one side, rearrange it so that it's just in the right order, whatever needs to happen. Then you're going to factor. There are 3 types that you are going to potentially have in this lesson. But here's the nice thing, is that each equation can only factor using one method. So you're going to check for GCF. If there's a GCF, You do not need to check anything else. It's a GCF, then move on to number 3. If there's not a GCF, you can check for your trinomials. If it's not a trinomial, you get to skip that one and go to the last one, which is a binomial, checking that for a difference of squares. In this lesson, every equation will factor, and every equation will factor using only one of those methods. So find which one it is, and we'll recall how to do all 3 of those. Once you have factored, you're going to have something that looks like this, or like this, or like this, or like this. Use your zero product property, solve for your variable, write your answer, and set notation. So example number 1. Am I in standard form ax squared plus bx plus c set equal to 0? I am not equal to 0. This is a simple fix. I need to get that equal to 0, so I need to subtract 15, and I need to subtract it from both sides because everything you do to one side you must do to the other. And I'm going to squeeze it in at the end because I want the x squared and then the x and then my constant. Now I'm equal to 0. Perfect. Move on to my factoring. Always start with GCF. Is there a GCF? 2, 1, and negative 15? Nope. X squared, x, and no variable? Nope. Move on to checking for my trinomials. Okay, so let's recall how to do this. Your trinomials are the one where you are going to multiply both of these numbers, the beginning and the end number. 2 times negative 15 is negative 30. You need your 2 numbers that multiply to be negative 30 and adds up to be a positive 1. I'm multiplying to be a negative, so I need 1 positive and 1 negative. So I could start with like 1 and 30, where my 1 could be negative. But negative 1 plus 30 is not 1. So now I can move on to negative 2 and 15. But negative 2 plus 15 is not 1. So move on to negative 3 and 10. But negative 3 plus 10 is not 1. So move on. 30 is not divisible by 4. So I'm going to move on to negative 5 and 6. And negative 5 plus 6 is in fact 1. So that's what I'm going to use. So when you factor these, you took this variable and half of its exponent. So I'm going to do x and x. I'm going to put a minus 5 in one and a plus 6 in the other. And then you are going to divide both of those by your a value, which was 2. Then you're going to check, can I divide it? Can I reduce the fraction? If you have a fraction left at any point, you slide the denominator in front of your variable. So 5 divided by 2 does not divide, and it does not reduce. So I'm going to slide and put 2x minus 5. And in my other parenthesis, x, and then 6 divided by 2 is 3. And this is set equal to 0. And now this looks just like the front did. You can take this and set it equal to 0 and solve. So you get 2x equals 5, and then x equals 5 over 2. And set your other one equal to 0. Get negative 3. So x equals negative 3 or 5 over 2. Which I also could have seen because I'd make this just the opposite, and I'd make this one the opposite, but then divide by my coefficient. Example 2 is already set equal to 0. It's okay that I'm missing a term, because we're going to deal with factoring, but they have to still be in the right order. I have an x squared, I don't have an x, and then I have my constant. That's fine. Factoring, GCF. Nope, it's not a trinomial, so nope. Check binomial for a difference of squares. Well, if the first 2 didn't work, the third one has to work. So it must be a difference of squares, which it is because this is a square. That is a minus, and 81 can be square rooted. Difference of squares are 2 parentheses. Square root both terms, m squared. And when I square that, I get m. Goes first in both sets. Put a minus in this one and a plus in this one. Square root of 81 is 9. That's it for factoring. Difference of squares. Square root both terms. Put one with a minus and one with a plus. This one should be easy to solve. Opposite of this and opposite of this gives me m equals plus or minus 9. What? This is going to equal a positive 9, and this is going to equal a negative 9. So I'm going to use this symbol that m equals plus or minus 9, because it's the same number, just it's positive or negative. Number 3, it's not set equal to 0, so I need to move this 4z to the other side. I'm going to subtract it to get z squared minus 4z equals 0. Z squared minus 4z has a GCF of z. When I divide z squared divided by z, I'm left with z. When I divide minus 4z divided by z, I get minus 4, equaling 0. This first one is going to equal 0. The second one is going to equal a positive 4. Right? Z equals 0, and then flip your sign. So z equals 0 or 4. And your last one, it's not set equal to 0, so I need to subtract 30x. And I need to squeeze it in the middle, because I need 9x squared minus 30x plus 25 equals 0. It has to be in that order. It has to be x squared x constant equals 0. GCF, no. Is it a trinomial? Yes. So I'm going to multiply 9 times 25 is 225. I need that to add up to be a negative 30, but I need to multiply to be a positive. So I'm going to need 2 negatives. I'm going to skip 1. Obviously, negative 1 and negative 225 is not going to work. 225 is not divisible by 2, so I can skip that. It's not divisible by 3, so I'm going to skip that. It's not divisible by 4, so I'm going to skip. Oh, wait, hold on. Pause. I messed up. 225 is divisible by 3, is negative 3 and negative 75, but does not add up to be negative 30. 225 is not divisible by 4, but it is divisible by 5, negative 5 and negative 45, but that does not add up to be negative 30, so skip that. 225 is not divisible by 6. 225 is not divisible by 7. 225 is not divisible by 8. 225 is divisible by 9. Negative 9 and 25, which does not add up to be negative 30. It's not divisible by 10. Not divisible by 11. Not divisible by 12. Not divisible by 13, 14, 15. It's negative 15 and negative 15, which adds up to be negative 30. So this is going to be x minus 15 and x minus 15. And I'm going to divide those both by 9. And then I'm going to reduce those fractions. 15 over 9 would be 5 over 3. Then you're going to slide the denominator in front, so that becomes 3x minus 5. And you hopefully notice that these are both the same sets of parentheses. So how many solutions will you have? Only one. And you're only going to write one. If you write 2, you're telling me that you think that there are 2 different answers. There's not. There's only one. Flip this sign. Positive 5 divided by coefficient. This one would be the same. Flip the sign, divide by the coefficient. Would be the same number. Now, I want to show you how to check these. As I said, your calculators help you check your answers, not do the problem for you, because your directions are going to say solve by factoring. But they can check these answers. So you need it set equal to 0, and then you're going to go into your graph, wherever that is. So I'm going to show you how my calculators work, and maybe yours works like this. If yours doesn't work like this, I can try to help you figure it out. I can't guarantee anything. So you should have a y equals button here, or maybe you do. And if you do, once you are set equal to 0, you're going to type everything in on the other side. So 2x squared plus x minus 15. And make sure you use a minus sign and not a negative. I'm going to go and graph. So y equals, type in your equation, graph. Now, you could try to like eyeball this and see, and I mean, this -3 is pretty easy to see that, but this 5/2, how do I know that that's 5/2 and not some other fraction or decimal? So if you see right here where it says calc in blue, you're going to hit this blue second button and then trace, and we're going to look for the 0. So down to number 2. Now, it's going to come up with asking about a left bound. You need to find somewhere is this little cursor. You need to find it. I want to focus on this x-intercept over here. So my cursor, I'm not going to look at this side of my graph. I'm looking at this part. I want that cursor, this little blinking thing, to be somewhere to the left of that x-intercept. I am currently left of that x-intercept. So once I'm anywhere left of it, hit enter. Now it comes up and asks about the right bound. So go somewhere to the right of that x-intercept. I am right of that x-intercept. I'm going to hit enter. And then it says guess. You just hit enter. And it comes up with 2.5, which is 5/2. And if you weren't sure about that, you can type 5 divided by 2 in your calculator and you would get that. That's how you check them. If you come to the second one, you clear that out. You just need to use an x instead of an m. X squared minus 81. I go to graph. Now you could count these, or we can do second calc. Go down to number 2. Need to find my cursor first. And if you're not sure, you can kind of follow this and see where it might be. I think my first one is -9. So if I go until past -9, and I need to go left of it, so I would be up here somewhere. Hit enter. And then I would go right of it, hit enter, and then enter, and I get -9. I need to find the second one the same way. Second trace down to 0. I want to go focus over here. I need to be left of it first, which is somewhere down here. So I'm going to arrow over until I come up to the other side. If I'm following this, it should be getting close to 9, right? There I am. I want to be left of it. Then I need to go to the right of it, and then I hit enter, and it is +9. So you can check these. You're going to be allowed to check them on your quizzes and your knowledge checks. But you have to have the work here. The calculator is just to help you check to make sure you are correct.